Good afternoon. Everyone, I think, has taken their seats, so let's go ahead and get started. My name is Courtney Greenlee. I serve as the alternate designated federal officer for the Defense Innovation Board. It is my role to open this public listening session of the Science and Technology Subcommittee of the Defense Innovation Board. Thank you to Stanford University for hosting us for today's session. If you have not done so already, please do silence your electronic devices. This session is part of the Defense Innovation Board initiative called the Artificial Intelligence Principles Project. Today's session is being recorded and live streamed to allow members of the public to attend virtually. It will also be accessible on the board's website, innovation.defense.gov. Thank you to the Defense Media Activity for providing their expert support to this event. Welcome to all of our in-person and virtual attendees. As we begin this public listening session, allow me to share a few procedural remarks. This board is a discretionary, independent advisory board operated under the Federal Advisory Committee Act and the Government Sunshine Act. Today's meeting was announced in the Federal Register Notice on February 15th, 2019. There have been no significant changes to the meeting's agenda as posted in the Federal Register Notice. The public was invited to submit written comments for the board members to consider. 9 written comments were received in advance of today's session. These comments will be posted online with the minutes of the meeting. We welcomed additional written comments on a rolling basis, which can be submitted via our website. The primary purpose of this session is to provide an opportunity for members of the public to provide verbal comments to the board subcommittee today. As a reminder, these are comments to the board, not a question and answer session. Board members may ask clarifying questions. With that, I now turn the meeting over to the board's executive director, Joshua Mercuse, for his opening remarks and introduction of our board members.
Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the second official public listening session in the Defense Innovation Board's AI Principles Project. Public participation in this process is essential to the design of this project and intrinsic to the purpose for which federal advisory committees like ours were formed. Whether you came here today to make a public comment or to listen, your presence today is an important part of our deliberative and consultative process. Special thanks to Stanford University for hosting us. In particular, the board recognizes the contribution of the recently launched Institute for Human-Centered AI, which graciously agreed to host today's session. Michael Salido, the deputy director, played an instrumental role in assisting us with these preparations. We're honored to be at one of the nation's premier institutions for AI research, development, thought, leadership, and application. I regret to say that our chairman, Dr. Eric Schmidt, who teaches here at Stanford, and is a technical advisor at Alphabet, has been called away on urgent business and sends his regrets. In lieu of Dr. Schmidt, we'll have Dr. Murray, who is one of the co-chairs of the Science and Technology Subcommittee, chair this listening session. So let me introduce Dr. Murray, who's at the end. Also, he's joined by Jennifer Palka, who's the founding executive director of Code for America, and also is the co-chair of our Workforce Behavior and Culture Subcommittee. And we also have Mr. Milo Medin, who's the Vice President of Wireless Services at Google and is also a member of the Science and Technology Subcommittee. So let me give a brief overview to set the context for this conversation and talk a little bit about the origin of the Principles Project and what it is that the board is engaged in doing. So last July, the Department of Defense asked the board to undertake an effort to establish a set of AI principles for defense. After several months of planning and internal discussions, in early 2019, the board began convening a mix of academics, researchers, ethicists, lawyers, business executives, nonprofit leaders, venture capitalists, policy experts, and a variety of others who are leaders in the AI field to provide input in the information gathering phase. The board is taking care to include the perspectives of not only experts who often work with the department, but also AI skeptics, DoD critics, and leading AI engineers who have never worked with the department before. There may be disagreements among this group, since these matters may be controversial, but the board has not shied away from respectful and forthright dialogue. That should lead to meaningful understanding on all sides, and a robust contest of ideas should generate new insights. As explained in the recently released DoD AI strategy, which I encourage all of you interested to read, it's available on the DoD website, DoD recognizes the need to view AI differently than other technologies, places particular emphasis on AI ethics and safety, which is a distinct line of effort in the AI strategy, and clearly affirms the imperative to get this issue right. AI systems not only affect the men and women who serve our country, but societies around the world. That is why the board is committed to a different process than what we typically do, with particular emphasis on transparency, inclusion, and robustness. We want everyone to take part in this dialogue because these issues touch everyone. Today's public listening session is just one element of the board's broader initiative to gather that input. So let me lay out for you how the rest of the session will unfold. In a moment, I'll ask Dr. Murray to call the session to order and say a few words on behalf of the DIB. Then we'll ask Mr. Andrew Grotto, the William J. Perry International Security Fellow at Stanford Center for International Security and Cooperation and a research fellow at the Hoover Institution. After Mr. Grotto, we'll ask Mr. Charles Allen, Deputy General Counsel for International Affairs at the Department of Defense, to speak on behalf of DoD's legal community on how policies and laws around human rights and armed conflict intersect with the emerging legal and ethical issues involving AI. Following Mr. Allen's remarks, we will begin with the public comments for the remainder of the time. And members of the audience can engage the board members and express their views on behalf of themselves or organizations that they represent. When we get to that point, I'll explain a little bit about the mechanics of how public comments will work in detail, but what I'll say now is if you haven't already grabbed a comment card, one of these, please do so. They were at the front desk as you walked in, or we can hand them out to you, but we need to get your name and contact information so that we can correctly identify you in the transcript. And so if you want to make a comment, you can just hand those up to me or give this to a member of my staff, and we will call on people in the order that they submitted their comments or requests to speak online. And once we've exhausted the list of people who requested to speak in advance, then we'll turn to audience members who submitted comment cards. And my hope is that with about more than 2 hours, we'll have time for everyone that wants to make remarks to do so. In the unlikely event that we run out of time, I would strongly encourage you to submit a comment online. All of the comments are read and reviewed, not only by the staff, but by the board, and they all become part of public record, part of the report. So please do look at our website for regular updates on how the project is unfolding. So these comments will be no longer than 5 minutes. I will give everyone a warning at 4 minutes by tapping on the podium. And at 5 minutes, I will have to ask you to step down so that everyone has an equal amount of time. So that being said, let me turn it over to Dr. Murray.
Thank you, Josh, and thank you all for coming and joining us here today. And thank you to Stanford University for serving as host. So the purpose of this session, as Josh said, is to hear from the public about ethical and responsible use of AI for the Department of Defense. It's very important to us that we hear all of the views as we try and help the Department of Defense think through what those principles should be. So I thank you for coming, and I encourage you, as Josh already has, if you have a comment that you'd like to make, please fill out a card and make a comment. It's a little bit of a kind of strange dialogue because we are, as Josh will tell you in a little bit, we're not allowed to kind of go back and forth with you. We sort of get to listen primarily in this session and hear, and then we kind of get to do our side of putting things out a little bit later. So this is really a listening session. We really want to hear from you. What do you think the department ought to be thinking about and ought to be taking into account in the area of ethical and responsible use of AI for the Department of Defense? So thank you for coming today. Thank you for the comments that we'll get from you as the day goes on, and we really appreciate your participation in this process. So with that, I'll turn it back to Josh.
So as I said, Stanford is a place not only where groundbreaking AI research is done, but where groundbreaking international security research is done, where many of the leading thinkers in our nation come to teach and to learn. We can't imagine a more appropriate place to have this discussion than here at Stanford. And so to represent Stanford, I'd like to ask Mr. Andrew Grotto to come say a few words. As I mentioned earlier, he's an international security fellow at the Center for National Security and Cooperation. He represents Hoover. His research explores the national security and international economic dimensions of America's global leadership in information technology innovation, and its growing reliance on innovation for its economic and social life. Before Stanford, he served as the White House's Senior Director for Cybersecurity Policy and a Senior Advisor for Technology Policy at the Secretary of Commerce, and on Capitol Hill to a number of other national security roles. So, very appropriate person for us to hear from as we kick off this discussion. Andrew, the floor is yours.
Welcome to Stanford. We're thrilled to have you on campus for this important conversation. My name is Andy Grotto. I'm a relatively recently arrived DC expat here at Stanford. As mentioned, I served in the Nevada White White House's as a senior Southwest National Security Council. Microphone. Check, check. Oh yeah, there we go. Why don't I start over for the benefit of the folks who are streaming? My name is Andy Grotto. I'm a relatively recently arrived DC expat here at Stanford, having served in both the Trump and the Obama administrations as Senior Director for Cyber Policy on the National Security Council. We have some really exciting initiatives underway here at Stanford on technology issues. I'm launching a new program here on geopolitics, technology, and governance under the banner of an exciting new research center on technology and international affairs. The new center will be housed at Freeman Spogli and launch in the coming months. Stay tuned for more on this in the near future. To the members of the DIB, I want to thank you for your service. You all have day jobs and are committing your time and energy in the service of your country on an extraordinarily sensitive and challenging topic, AI ethics. Your efforts to contribute to the design of an ethical compass for AI and DoD's mission has the potential to shape strategic and ethical thinking and defense strategy for many years to come. You have my gratitude. What makes a compass work is the fact that magnets have two poles. The push and pull between these two poles is what determines the orientation of the needle. When one of those poles is distorted or absent, the compass will lead us astray. In other words, in a compass, harnessing and managing tension is essential to finding direction. I think the same is true for AI ethics. One way to think about your mission is how best to harness and manage the various tensions, pushes, and pulls, debate about the role of AI in the national defense domain. This requires open, respectful debate, careful, deliberate thought and reflection. Your presence here today and the Department of Defense's broader efforts at outreach and engagement are evidence to me that you wholeheartedly agree and are hungry for partners, sounding boards, and even respectful critics. And I think there's no better place to have this conversation than at a university, particularly this one here in the heart of Silicon Valley, where scientists, engineers, and policymakers are trained, and where so many innovations in technology have occurred. So let me also extend my gratitude to the people here today from the Stanford and the broader community. You have so much to bring to this important discussion. Indeed, if you care about the safety, security, and ethical bearings of this country, you have a responsibility to join this debate. I submit to you all that the Defense Innovation Board is not setting out to design a proprietary compass for the Department of Defense to own and lock away. It is designing a compass that reflects our values as a country. It will be our compass as much as it is DoD's. I also want to encourage you all, if you don't get a chance to speak today, provide written comments to these folks. Having served in government myself and been involved in many of these types of engagements, I can promise you that your comments will get read, considered, and debated by the people in this in the room today. So thank you all for being with us, and I hope we're able to continue this dialogue for the indefinite future. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So our next speaker will be Mr. Chuck Allen. Mr. Allen is an undergraduate alumnus of Stanford, so something of a homecoming for him. And he's served as DoD's Deputy General Counsel for International Affairs since 2000. His area of responsibility encompasses a wide range of issues, including law of armed conflict, war crimes, war powers, activities of U.S. forces under international law, and United Nations Security Council resolutions, and international litigation. Prior to his position, he served in the Navy, where his career spanned numerous positions in the legal community, culminating as the Deputy Legal Advisor to the National Security Council as part of the U.S. Navy Judge Advocate General's Board. Mr. Allen will walk us through how he and his colleagues are advising DoD on how to apply AI use cases within the framework of the law for a variety of applications. Mr. Allen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Josh. I appreciate that introduction. I'm really happy to have this opportunity to give you some background about the Department of Defense's practice of law, legal practice, and especially our strong commitment to the law and ethics. We are, in fact, committed to compliance with the law in all DoD programs, activities, operations, including compliance with the law of war in all military operations. The law of war is also known as the law of armed conflict and international humanitarian law, or IHL. And for the most part, I'm going to be using IHL in this talk. Our leaders in the department have especially focused on ethics and legality. Acting Secretary Shanahan's recent memo to the department stated, "A key component of leadership is reinforcing ethical behavior across the full spectrum of our work and recognizing ethics principles as the foundation upon which we make sound, informed decisions." These words reflect the approach that DoD also applies to AI. Earlier this year, DoD released an unclassified summary of its strategy on AI. I was very happy to see that the strategy's one of its 5 pillars is leading in military ethics and AI safety. The strategy describes in this pillar DoD's intention to lead in AI ethics and safety by articulating and realizing the vision and guiding principles for using AI in a lawful and ethical manner, including to improve civilian protections under the law of war, investing in research and development for resilient, robust, reliable, secure, and explainable AI, and also, all the while, promoting transparency. Our work on the responsible use of AI builds on existing DoD policies. You may not know this, but one is DoD's directive on autonomy in weapons systems, really before its time, initiated in 2012 under the tenure of then Deputy Secretary of Defense Ash Carter, who issued the directive, which is binding on the entire department after careful study of past DoD practice in using autonomy in weapons systems, such as the Patriot missile system and the Aegis combat system. The directive captured lessons learned from past experience in using weapon systems with autonomous functions. It establishes strong guidelines to minimize the probability of failure and the consequences of any failure in autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems that could lead to unintended engagements, such as unexpectedly harming friendly forces or civilians. Again, the directive, dating back even to 2012, has the following overarching requirement, policy statement. Quote, "Autonomous and semi-autonomous weapon systems shall be designed to allow commanders and operators to exercise appropriate levels of human judgment over the use of force," unquote. It requires realistic and rigorous testing, clear human-machine interface, and training for commanders and operators that is commensurate with their responsibilities. In addition, compliance with the law, including international humanitarian law, underlies all DoD programs and operations. It's foundational as well to DoD's responsible use of artificial intelligence. So international humanitarian law itself is a well-established body of law that governs conduct during armed conflict at its core. The U.S. military has a long history of law of war compliance. This is touched on in some depth in the DoD Law of War Manual, which I'll say a little bit more about in these remarks. And I'm very glad to be accompanied by the chief author of that manual over about a 7-year period, Carl Chang, who's with me. For the United States, the law of war includes the treaties of the United States that the United States has accepted, such as the 1949 Geneva Conventions and many more, as well as customary international law. The law of war seeks to reduce unnecessary suffering in war. It protects civilians and other persons who are hors de combat, or out of the fight. The law of war permits targeting of enemy combatants and military objectives, and only military objectives, like enemy tanks and aircraft, but it prohibits the targeting of civilians and protected objects such as hospitals and museums. As I mentioned, DoD's longstanding policy is to comply with IHL in all military operations, whether in armed conflict or not. DoD has robust processes to implement IHL, including for training, required reporting of incidents involving alleged violations, and this goes for our forces, foreign forces, absolute requirements to report any such violations, and investigations and reviews of incidents and corrective actions, which of course can include discipline or judicial processes as appropriate. We have our 1,200-page Law of War manual, authored by Carl Chang, and with a little help from all the military departments and many others. It collects and explains Law of War requirements. I commend it to you. I think it's a good thing to have on your desktop. It's incredibly searchable, and it actually has gotten a lot of play, I think, worldwide in academics, but most importantly for its target audience, which is all of our practitioners around the world in the Department of Defense. It's authoritative guidance for DoD personnel and is available publicly online. We are always actually welcoming comments as well. We've made a couple of revisions to the manual. We try to keep it current, of course. The DoD General Counsel's website has it, along with quite an extensive compilation of other official documents on the Law of War. Practitioners. DoD has thousands of military and civilian lawyers advising commanders and decision makers on legality, including IHL compliance, wherever our people are around the world. They review the intended acquisition of weapons. Imagine all of the systems command of all the military departments throughout the country, and all the way up through the sub-cabinet and sometimes the cabinet level in Washington, D.C., advising on the legality of those acquisition decisions. They review all military plans, operations orders, and rules of engagement. I'd like to mention 3 ways in which international humanitarian law can inform DoD's responsible use of artificial intelligence. Now, I don't mean to suggest that IHL provides all the legal answers on AI. It clearly does not. As noted in the DoD AI strategy, the department is seeking to harness the potential of AI to transform all functions of the department positively, and not just AI as it relates to weapons or the nation's wars. Depending on the type of application, AI could raise other legal issues. For example, privacy, civil liberties, or medical ethics issues. As for IHL, however, DoD has deeply internalized compliance with it. As the DoD Law of War manual puts it, the law of war is part of who we are. You will find this to be true among all the military departments, including U.S. soldiers. I'm happy to see a U.S. soldier here with us today, sailors, airmen, and Marines all around the world, and Pentagon senior leaders alike. Because the law of war reflects the department's ethical values, like accomplishing the mission the best way we can for the American people and protecting civilians, IHL absolutely is an important part of the department's approach to using AI in armed conflict. First, I'd say that existing IHL rules apply when new technologies such as cyber or new types of AI are used in armed conflict. That's true. All matters of that sort get legal reviews. The law of war actually anticipates technological innovation and contemplates that its existing rules will apply to new means and methods of warfare. IHL rules can apply to new technologies because although some rules are specific to certain types of weapons in IHL, there are IHL rules relating to mines, incendiaries, and the like. But IHL rules generally are not framed in terms of specific technological means. For example, the rules on conducting attacks do not depend on what type of weapon is used to conduct the attack. So if AI is used to help DoD perform an activity that is subject to IHL, like conducting an attack, that activity continues to be subject to applicable IHL rules. including that attacks must be directed against military objectives only. Attacks must not be conducted when they are expected to cause excessive collateral damage, and feasible precautions must be taken to reduce the risk of harm to civilians. Another way IHL can inform DoD's use of AI is through its principles. These are covered, I think, very nicely, the black letter law as well as many annotations going into more depth. But some of the fundamental principles of IHL are military necessity, humanity, distinction, proportionality, and honor. Now, these principles provide a general guide for conduct during war. Where no more specific rule applies, the principles are still referred to. Or said another way, even if there's not a specific international law rule prohibiting something, by no means is it the case that anything goes. Rather, it's still always important to consider whether, under IHL, a contemplated action is justified by military necessity and to ensure an action is not unreasonable or excessive under the principle of proportionality. In this way, the fundamental principles of IHL provide a framework to consider novel legal and ethical issues posed by emerging technologies, such as AI. In international discussions on emerging technologies, we have said in Geneva forums on emerging technologies that the group of governmental experts of the parties to the Convention on Conventional Weapons the following. If the use of a new technology advances the universal values inherent in the law of war, such as the protection of civilians, then the development or use of this technology is likely to be more ethical than refraining from such use. This leads to my third point about IHL that informs DoD's use of AI. Using AI expressly to improve our implementation of civilian protections. The law recognizes that civilian casualties are a tragic, but at times unavoidable part of armed conflict. IHL requires that militaries take feasible precautions to reduce the risk of casualties, civilian casualties. But just as new advancements in AI have the potential to save lives in peacetime by reducing the risk of car accidents or improving medical diagnoses, advancements in AI could also help save the lives of civilians during war by improving precautions we can take to protect civilians. One way AI could do this is by making weapons more accurate. Smart weapons are not particularly new, but weapons that use computers and autonomous functions to deploy force more precisely and efficiently have in fact been shown to reduce risks of harm to civilians and civilian objects. Weapon systems with automated target recognition allow the weapons to lock onto targets and strike military objectives more accurately and with less risk of harm to civilians and civilian objects. And when the weapon is more accurate, fewer weapons need to be fired to achieve the same military advantage. Another way that AI could create humanitarian benefits is by improved military awareness of civilians during military operations, simply where they are. The fog of war means that the information available during war is limited and unreliable often due to the chaos of combat and the opposing side's efforts to deceive one another. Due to this fog of war, commanders might be unaware that civilians are in or near military objective. AI likely could help reduce those kinds of mistakes. As a case in point, many of you have heard about Project Maven. It's a DoD effort to use AI to improve analysis of video from intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance platforms. By using AI to identify objects of interest from imagery autonomously, Analysts can search through much larger quantities of data and can focus on the more sophisticated and important tasks requiring human judgment. We truly believe this kind of work could help improve the commander's battle space awareness and really help cut through the fog of war. This could mean better identification of civilians and civilian objects on the battlefield, which allows our commanders to take steps to reduce the risk of harm to them. Another common theme underlying potential humanitarian benefits of AI on the battlefield is a sort of a convergence between military and humanitarian interests. When use of force is necessary to protect and defend our country and our people, the military wants to use force more accurately, precisely, and efficiently. We want to make faster and more accurate decisions. These military advantages also bring humanitarian benefits in many cases in terms of reducing the risk to civilians from military operations. In a more direct sense and sort of outside of the armed conflict context, DoD is working on ways to use AI capabilities for humanitarian purposes. The Joint Artificial Intelligence Center has a national mission initiative on humanitarian assistance and disaster relief. They're applying lessons learned and reusable tools from Project Maven to field AI capabilities to help first responders all around the country and in fact around the world in many cases, responding to wildfires, typhoons, hurricanes. I'll close now, eager to listen and learn from this session today, along with the DIB members. We recognize the need to be open and to embrace a diversity of ideas. DoD respects the right of individuals and U.S. companies and industry and their workforces to express their views. Of course, it's no surprise to anybody to say this is one of the very freedoms guaranteed by our Constitution that all of us in DoD are sworn to defend. On an issue like artificial intelligence, we have much to learn from perspectives outside the department, and we look forward to learning from many of you today. I'm looking forward to getting help in harnessing that tension that was referred to. Thank you very much.
All right, now we get to do the fun part. So just as a reminder, we will now hear from you, the audience, for the rest of our allotted time. Many of you have submitted comments online, and I'll start with those first. If you haven't, please do hand out one of the comment cards. If you need one, raise your hand. A member of my team will get one right to you. And I just wanted to, another quick reminder, everyone will have up to 5 minutes. I will tap at when you have 1 minute left, and then we'll wrap up. When you do arrive at the mic, please do state your first and last name clearly for the record and also your affiliation. And I just wanted to emphasize again that we do regret this is not an opportunity for a question and answer session. The board members really want to hear your views on AI ethics and national security. They may ask clarifying questions of you if they wish, but this is really your opportunity to have your views be heard. Due to time constraints, we will need to end at 4:30, whether we've exhausted the list of people that want to speak or not, but hopefully that is ample time for us to get through it. And so with that said, I will get started. So the first request we received was from Link Parikh. Is Link here? Great. Gavan Wilhite. Glenn Kesselman. Oh, are you Gavin? You're Glenn? Fantastic. Glenn, would love to hear from you. And is Stephen Bong here? Dr. John Potter? Well, why don't we go right ahead with you, Glenn, and thank you very much. Oh, absolutely. We will definitely be getting you started. I'm sort of trying to do someone speaking and someone on deck, but I will make sure to add you. Bo Rogers? You bet, sir. We'll definitely be hearing from you today.
Glenn Kesselman, retired Army colonel in technology, cybersecurity. not so much of an ethics question, it's more of a direction question. I understand that in China, President Xi has issued a very strong directive for China to focus on AI. AI courses are even offered in the high schools. It's my understanding. It's my understanding that we have a fragmented policy in the U.S., and that I think this puts us at a very serious, not only competitive disadvantage, but a strategic disadvantage, especially for the military. So I just wanted to express my concern that senior leadership, both in the DoD and in the civilian side of the government, really focus in on how we can match this very strong initiative that the Chinese government seems to have, so we can maintain not only our leadership worldwide ethically, but also in our capability to produce AI systems.
Terrific. Thank you very much, sir. So next up is Marta Kazmina here. Great. So Marta, we'll have you speak next. Is Zach Pashtijan here? Forgive me if I mispronounced that. Zach. Okay. Mr. Toby Walsh. Great. So we'll hear from you, Marta, and then Mr. Walsh, please. So you can start to make your way towards either microphone. Of course you may, Marta. You bet. So Marta, if you would please approach the mic when you're ready, and let me say, Mr. Walsh, are you prepared? Fantastic. So is Professor Herb Lin here? Wonderful. So if we could have you next, and hopefully, Marta, by then you'll be ready to go. Thank you, sir. Over to you. 5 minutes, please.
Good afternoon. I've spent the last 35 years or more working in artificial intelligence, and 5 years ago, like many of my colleagues, I started to be rather concerned in the direction that some of the technology was going, in the way, in particular, the possibilities of fully autonomous weapons. It's a concern that many of my colleagues share. In fact, I got 1,000 of them to sign an open letter, a lot of attention at the leading AI conference, and it was featured in newspapers around the world, raising our concerns to weapons. And I just wanted to just mention a couple of concerns that I and my colleagues have. The first one is that I think often people don't realize that concerns will change. The concerns will change as the technology becomes more sophisticated, and the concerns that you might have today will be different, will change, and will be different concerns once the technology is more sophisticated. The sorts of concerns, and I'm just going to focus on technical issues. I mean, there are many legal, moral, and other issues I think that we should be thinking about, but just calling upon my background as an AI researcher, the technical concerns that I would have in terms of having full autonomy in targeting. The concerns today with the sorts of weapons that you see being prototyped now are that the AI is a very brittle technology. We talk about artificial intelligence, and it's the name that we have, better or for worse. Many of us dislike the use of the name, and the word intelligence is a very misleading one, because we are guided by our own intelligence without realizing that the sorts of algorithms that we can build, the sorts of computer vision systems, break in ways that human vision systems don't break. We can change a single pixel, we can rotate an image by a few degrees, and get a completely different result. That's not the sort of technology you want to be putting people's lives into the hands of. There are other technical concerns you'd have today. The fact that every computer system that we know that we can build, someone's going to hack. And so you would have the possibility that these could be used for quite distasteful ends. And then the concerns that we were promised that we were going to be given smart weapons in the Gulf War and elsewhere, and then we see that 9 out of 10 of people being targeted by drones are not the intended target. That's why you've still got a human in the loop. And if I was given the task of at trying to match what a human can do today with their finger on the trigger with a predator drone. I would be aiming to make 9 out of 10 mistakes. That's when you've still got a human with their great situational awareness. So those are some of the sorts of technical concerns one would have today. And then as the technology becomes more sophisticated, the concerns change. They're not the same concerns you'll have in 10 years' time or 20 years' time. That these would ultimately be quite terrible weapons, that they would be... We're not going to keep a technical lead on anyone. The history of military technologies is one that you've always... Any technology that's been developed has been developed by the other side or stolen by the other side very shortly. These are going to be weapons which are going to be easy to replicate. You're not going. It's not like nuclear proliferation where you have to get your hands on fissile material. These are going to be cheap, plentiful weapons. They are, as we said back in 2015, they are going to be the Kalashnikovs of the future. And so we're going to have to expect to be on the receiving end of them, and that's going to be rather destabilizing in an already very destabilized world. There's lots of absolutely great things that the military can use AI for. I always like to point out, clearing a minefield, we should never have a human ever do that again. We should only ever get robots to do that, and when it goes wrong, we go and go out and get a new robot. And even in weaponry, there's plenty of good things. Many of the arguments I hear for the humanitarian benefits that we will get from having smarter weaponry are ones that you will get even if you don't have full autonomy. If you make, for example, the weapon smart enough to disable itself when it realizes that is not a valid military target. You don't have to give the decision to the machine. You can actually make it smarter and get those humanitarian benefits without full autonomy. And we do have a brief window, I think, today to avoid an arms race that we do see starting to happen, that it will be take us to a very dangerous place, and one where our global security won't be improved. In fact, will be harmed. The existence of these weapons will make warfare in the world a much less safe place. Yeah, sure.
Missions not being properly targeted. Do you have what's the reference for that?
That was the Intercept, the drone papers that they leaked out of the Pentagon, suggested in
You have a date?
I'd have to go back and check it.
I'll Google it.
I think
that's fine.
It was 2017.
Okay.
Let's see.
Great. So we'll hear from Professor Lin. Thank you.
Microphone? Yes. Okay,
Jack.
thanks. Herb Lin, Stanford University. So I wanted to bring up 3 issues. One is the question of overtrust in AI systems. One is the question of explainable AI, and the other is a comment about the principles. On the overtrust issue, one of the things that I worry about, having seen lots of people interact with computer systems, is they trust computer systems way too much. And one of the best examples I know of this is a recent demonstration of people trying to follow a robot lead them out of a simulated burning building, and they followed the robot into blind alleys and rooms with no other doors in them, and so on, even after they had seen the robot screw up. I worry about that a lot. If we have AI systems that are going to be ubiquitous, which is what we keep on hearing, that's a tendency that breeds over trust. You sort of see it all the time, you sort of start to trust it, and you may easily start to over-trust it. I want to put in a plea for AI systems that know when they are operating outside of their zone of competence. AI systems should not always give you the best possible answer. It should give you sometimes an answer that says, I have no idea what I'm doing here, don't trust me. And that to me is a really important thing. On the explainable AI system, there are very few things that terrify me more than recommendations made or conclusions drawn when I can't interrogate the reasoning. DARPA's had a long time had a program for explainable AI. As I understand, the progress there is slow, but that's a really important thing. To be able to explain the reasoning behind some conclusion, some classifications, and that will help boost the commander's confidence in using it. Imagine a command and control system that advises a commander about a suggested course of action. The commander wants to be able to say, "Why did you tell me that? What's the reasoning?" And it'll also result in better IHL compliance, because of what happens in the fog of war. You want to be able to explain a decision that why did this weapon destroy this particular target, and it turned out to be simply what were the characteristics, what were the circumstances of it. And the last thing is about the principle. I think someone said at the beginning of this, I can't remember who, said that the principles for AI are different than they are for other kinds of technology. I want to push back on that, or at least question that assumption a little bit. It seems to me that many of the principles that I've seen articulated for ethical and responsible use of AI are just the same as you would say if the words were technology enabled or something like that. I have written pieces on both these things, and I'll be submitting them for the record.
Tremendous. Marta? Kazmina? Campaign to Stop Killer Robots. And everyone, if you would please, I would recommend speaking about 2 or 3 inches away from the microphone and use your best outdoor voice to make sure that the live stream can hear us loud and clear. Thank you.
Sure. Can everyone hear me?
Perfect.
Loud and clear. All right, as was said, my name is Marta Kuzmina. I'm the Silicon Valley lead for the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots, which basically means I am engaging the tech sector out here in academia and the media, letting them know what we're all about. We're basically a coalition of 106 organizations operating in now 54 countries, working to preserve meaningful human control over weapon systems. I just wanted to respond a little bit to the comments made by Mr. Allen earlier, because we participate very heavily in the international process at the United Nations to get new international policy to get a preemptive ban on fully autonomous weapons. And we do hear from the US delegation the line that international humanitarian law is sufficient and there should be renewed focus on Article 36 reviews. So the thing about international humanitarian law is when it was written, I don't think we could even imagine a world where weapons were not controlled by humans, where selecting and engaging a target was not done by a human hand. And international humanitarian law also requires individual criminal responsibility. And with this new class of weapons, there's been created an accountability gap where it's unclear who would be held responsible, whether it's the programmer, the robot, the machine itself, the commander, and as a commander willing to, at the state of technology we have now and at the rate it's progressing, if they're not able to understand how a system works and how an algorithm reaches its conclusions and to put their own soldiers' lives at risk, are we willing to put that responsibility and accountability on a commander? In terms of Article 36 reviews, I think the ICRC said that out of the 100 or so countries that produced weapons last year, only about 20 of them conduct Article 36 reviews. So that's not a very good percentage. It's great that the United States has a rigorous ethical review process, but we need to take into account countries that do not follow similar rules. We've often heard the argument that fully autonomous weapons would be more accurate, fewer weapons would be fired, it would save soldiers' lives, but we believe that these things could be achieved with semi-autonomous systems and that we don't need to cede control over weapon systems to achieve these same aims. I think we'd want to submit further comments in writing, but thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you. And let me say also how much we would welcome those comments in writing from anyone that wants to submit them, and they can be submitted at our website, innovation.defense.gov, which I believe is right up there. So please do make an oral comment, but also written comments. Very much welcome. Is Renata Barreto here? Right. Mr. Rogers, thank you. Please.
Thank you. My name is Bo Rogers. Hopefully that's audible. I earned a Bronze Star serving in combat in Vietnam. That's not my purpose for coming up. I have a company called VetTech. We find, develop, and fund veteran-led high-tech startups. Here with some other combat people. And I was not intending to come up and speak. I was just moved by the ethical response. In Vietnam, we had a saying, friendly fire isn't. And the poignancy of that comment really is aimed at as you prioritize how we apply AI. And it sounds like the use cases really from the attorney were really up there. I think it is the friendly fire concept and who is in harm's way and how do we apply AI. Because in the field of combat, it's not atypical that your enemy will surround themselves with a body of civilians. That's part of the process of this. So I'm only encouraging as you sit down and on a whiteboard, however you assemble the use cases of AI, the money it's sent, I really think and encourage you that our troops and those of civilians really is at the top of the list of AI, because I'm sure there's a myriad of ways we could apply AI to different military uses, but I really encourage you. That's got to be right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Is John O'Brien? Anthony Aguirre? Great. Anthony, please.
I'm Anthony Aguirre. I'm a professor of physics, and I'm the co-founder of an organization called the Future of Life Institute. We're a small but highly successful nonprofit that has led numerous efforts to advance the beneficial and ethical development of AI. Our organization has submitted written comments with 11 practical recommendations for the board, but I will summarize 4 of them in our comments for you now. So first, the DoD should adopt and translate the widely endorsed Asilomar AI principles. In 2017, FLI helped develop 23 Asilomar AI principles through a deliberative consultative process. They've been signed by over 1,200 AI researchers, including some of the foremost researchers in academia and private industry. Last year, the principles were also endorsed by the state of California. Several of the principles are highly relevant for the board to use in the bedrock AI principles for defense. Second, human judgment and control should always be preserved in the use of weapon systems so as to avoid delegation of critical decisions or in a way that can be scaled to large numbers of autonomous agents. The future AI principles for defense must continue to ensure, as stipulated in DoD Directive 3000.09, that commanders and operators can exercise appropriate levels of human judgment over the use of force. Further, DoD should advocate for the inclusion of this or a stronger standard by international partners, including NATO and by our near-peer adversaries. Third, critical AI systems should be subjected to rigorous testing and operational exercises prior to deployment. This testing should have the explicit goal of manipulating AI systems into recommending unethical decisions through adversarial examples, reward hacking, and active red teaming. For example, foreign combatants have long been known to use civilian facilities such as schools to shield themselves from attack when firing long-distance rockets. An AI system supporting target acquisition in those situations must be intentionally tested to try to provoke it to recommend unethical decisions, such as recommending to engage when collateral damage would be unacceptable. Testing of AI systems should ensure reliability and alignment with human preferences, robustness against attack, protections from misuse, and close monitoring of the intersection of AI with other weapon systems, such as nuclear command.
Anthony, if you would just a little bit closer to the mic.
Sorry. Fourth, DoD, and especially the JAIC, should maintain a central classified inventory of how, where, and for what purpose different AI systems are developed for national security purposes. We have reservations regarding the desire articulated in the DoD's 2018 strategy to enable decentralized development and experimentation at the forward edge in order to scale and democratize access to AI. While well-intentioned, overly decentralized development and experimentation may quickly lead to applications of AI systems for tasks that they were not specifically designed for. These unplanned uses may result in unethical and unsafe outcomes. To protect against these potential outcomes, the JAIC should maintain centralized inventories with information on the design and acceptable uses of all AI systems, and make this inventory available for independent oversight by the Inspector General and congressional committees. As research develops in AI safety and machine ethics and DoD adopts new policy accordingly, these inventories will also facilitate the deployment of updates to all relevant AI systems to maintain proper and ethical and responsible use. Thank you for your time and consideration of our written and oral comments.
So let me just ask, is there anyone that requested to make a comment online whose name I have not called? Great. So we may have had a little gap. So if you wouldn't mind, just please fill out one of these forms because I'm moving to those now. So please just raise your hand. Aaron will hand them out to you. We're very much looking forward to hearing from you. Thanks for bearing with us. Next, we have Glenn Dawson, please, and Lucy Suchman after that. So, Glenn, over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for the Defense Innovation Board. My name is Glenn Dawson. I'm the CEO and founder of Valkyrie Systems Aerospace. We build a aerospace system that is designed to literally resupply and rescue wounded soldiers. And as it started off that way 3 decades ago, the artificial intelligence and machine learning that has actually been built now into the aircraft to do that one mission CONOP, it was critical to put the artificial intelligence on board of the aircraft. In order to see a rocket-propelled grenade literally at the time of release, in order to put a defensive capability on it and actually save the life of the warrior in the battlefield, it is ever-changing. It is critical and imperative that we actually be able to see in microseconds really what we have to actually take an offensive action or strategic defensive capability against. Standing back and waiting for our enemies to fire us with our rules of engagement is nice in the rule books and the IHLs. If there's anybody that's been in the battlefield and had somebody shooting at you, the best laid plans that you actually go out there with change dramatically and instantaneously. As we start to look at the what-ifs of scenarios of artificial intelligence, the humanitarian things that have come off the battlefield technology that we designed and built into these aircraft can now fly into hurricanes using ground-penetrating radar, hyperspectral, as well as other cameras and sensors to give us a real-time data compute and analysis on board if the roads and bridges are safe for our first responders to go in on. We can transport goods, and we can actually go into forward landing positions and actually bring communications and response back to those areas that are contested. So as we look towards the life and how we can actually help our brothers in humanitarian areas like that in Puerto Rico, or if we were having major wildfire here in California again, these cameras and sensors can now literally tell the ulcerations on power lines through the thermal images that we're picking up off the hyperspectral. We could also then actually do risk mitigation and risk analysis towards future predictive analytic results that will actually come into event. So we can now look at a 3, 6, 9 month time cycle of vegetation, power lines, whether it be using the long wave hyperspectral to look for, say, a methane gas coming off a pipeline, or if it's a naturally occurring methane, and separate those two and tell you when you need to go out and service that pipeline. Right now, it could take 6 weeks to a month or more to actually get a service member into the field to service some of our national pipelines. That's too long. So as we start to look at actually how we're going to fly with a piloting command under these swarms, we can actually have right now 27 aircraft in the air. And each one of my aircraft right now is collecting terabytes and terabytes of data every hour. I process the known phenomenology of the client, and I process that, and I actually take that packaging off in near real time. But I'm also been banking for many years now all that raw data that we can now go back and look towards purchase or resale, and how are we going to bring that out. So the ethics of that we as a board and as a company suffer with is we know too much, and we don't want that getting out there. We also want to protect us as citizens, individuals, of our privacy as we start to go forward and actually start launching hundreds of vehicles into the air. So we thank the DIB for bringing up this very incredible issue, and we think that there's very, very good things to be learned from these efforts. So thank you.
Thank you very much. And we have Professor Lucy Suchman. And if you would like to speak, please make sure that we have your card.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm here because I was invited by the board to participate in the panels that are occurring tomorrow. And I want to thank the board for that. I believe I probably fall into the category of AI skeptic. And I'm speaking based on many decades of engagement with the field. And I would just like to enter some comments into the public record as well. and I want to focus my comments on the question of target identification, which is a critical part of the proposals for the introduction of AI into weapon systems. And in particular, the relationship between target identification and rule number 1 of international humanitarian law, which is the distinction between those who are in combat and those who are outside of combat. And as we know, we're in a period of so-called irregular warfare, where that question of who actually constitutes a combatant, who constitutes an imminent threat, is more problematic for humans to address than it has ever been before. Articulating the criteria for making that distinction is extremely difficult. And I think it's crucial that we distinguish in the language of precision and accuracy the difference between the precision with which a weapon which has been targeted will actually strike the designated target, and precision in the identification of targets. So my central concern in my engagement with these issues has to do with seriously addressing the question of what are the criteria for the discrimination between those who are inside of combat and those who are outside of combat, and for the identification of an imminent threat that warrants the initiation of force. And I will leave it to all of us to think about the current and possibly imagined future state of AI in relation to the challenges that question poses.
Thank you, ma'am. So we will hear from Mr. Chris Cundy first, and Dr. Amanda Askell, you are on deck.
Hi there. Cool. So I'm a PhD student at Stanford CS department, and I just wanted to say that I'm very glad that the DoD is taking AI ethics seriously. So to me, as someone who does research in this field, it's very clear that AI is posed to be an extremely important general use technology over the next few decades. And I think one of the key aspects of AI is that many of the applications are dual use. So you get large benefits, but you have the potential of large downsides as well. As an example, better language models can let us communicate fluently with computer systems, but they can also lead to convincing fake news that can destabilize democracy. Better drone controlling software could be used for search and rescue applications, but also for drone weapons for insurgents in asymmetric warfare. And I think the DoD has a really unique place as a big sponsor of AI research, and I hope that this AI ethics initiative will lead to a more considered evaluation of the long-term impacts, both good and bad, of the research that they fund. I think a second point that's interesting to me is that it's very unclear what the impact of AI will be on the geopolitical landscape in the future. So some features of AI seem very likely to lead to more turbulent geopolitical situation in the future, such as autonomous weapons, meaning it's easier to have wars with fewer casualties and less political implications. But other features seem to lead to more centralization of power and less turbulence. Those are things like efficiency of surveillance and facial recognition, which mean that authoritarian regimes can get more entrenched in power. And I think a key problem is even if the world is very turbulent, even if there are no explicit bad actors, if there are more sort of political tensions all around, then accidents or misunderstandings are much more likely to occur. We saw those things with some close calls with nuclear weapons during the Cold War. But I think the US government and the DoD has been in the past a key agent for ensuring global stability and steering the world away from dangerous dynamics that have arisen with previous powerful technologies, such as nuclear, biological weapons, and cyber warfare. And this was achieved both by research that identifies key dangerous aspects of those powerful technologies, and also strong international agreements to responsibly develop those technologies and avoid dynamics that could be dangerous, like arms races. And I really hope that the DoD Ethics Board will allow the US to continue to lead the world towards a bright future where AI is used responsibly for the benefit of all, and those dangers are preemptively identified and dealt with. Thanks.
Perfect. Next we have Dr. Amanda Askell from OpenAI and John Asterda from Stanford. You are on deck, sir.
I'm going to mostly read out comments that I've made online. So.
Amanda, if you're just a little bit closer to the
Closer?
mic.
Okay, I'm right at the mic. Is that okay? Okay, cool. So I think that the ethical and responsible use of AI mainly involves principles that are quite uncontroversial. So people have talked about things like, avoid unnecessary civilian casualties, avoid accidentally creating conflict that wouldn't have otherwise existed. I think a key problem, though, is going to be finding ways of assuring that you abide by those principles in particular cases with particular systems, especially when they're deployed in particular environments. And so an example of this might be, you deploy an automated navigation system without realizing that it's going to move vessels into foreign territory if it's just given data that's sufficiently unlike the data that it's had before. So that would be a kind of disastrous system to deploy. And if you just had either no checks or imperfect checks, relying on things that people have already talked about, like human in the loop, which are quite imperfect, you could end up just violating an extremely obvious principle, like don't create unnecessary conflict, completely unintentionally, by just not knowing about the system in question. So if this kind of view of responsible AI deployment is correct, then I think one key issue is just going to be finding both expertise about the domains in which these systems are being deployed, which I think the DoD has, but also expertise in the systems themselves and some of the foreseeable consequences if you're working on them technically that might not be foreseeable if you are not working on the systems themselves. And I think if that's right, then a key source of expertise here is going to be coming from industry and academia, where these systems are being developed, and where there are people who spend most of their time actually thinking about the potential for either the misuse of these systems, that people have talked a little bit about systems being hacked, for example, but also just potential for accidents from those systems, as well as potential societal impacts that one didn't anticipate. So we heard that about language models and fake news as an example of that. So if this is correct, then it's going to be important to combine these two types of expertise, and I think this is going to be extremely useful for being sensitive to things that differentiate AI from previous technologies, so its particular data, hardware, talent dependencies, but also the difficulty of identifying the reasons behind its outputs, its dual-use potential, its novel capabilities, and combining that with a sensitivity to the environment that it's being deployed in. Like I said, being aware of the ways in which your system could react badly to new data is very important. If this is right, then closer collaboration between the DoD and industry and academia might be kind of necessary in order to actually apply these principles well. And if that's correct, then I think that one issue is going to be the question of how to foster that kind of relationship. It seems that at the moment there's a fairly large intellectual divide between the two groups. And so a lot of my comments just spoke to steps that I think could be taken to improve that relationship. So I think a lot of AI researchers don't fully understand the concerns and motivations of the DoD, and are uncomfortable with the idea of their work being used in a way that they would consider harmful, whether unintentionally or just through lack of safeguards. I think that a lot of defense experts possibly don't understand the concerns and motivations of AI researchers, so they're not necessarily concerned about things like protectionism and aggressive foreign policies as a kind of article of faith, but rather because they're genuinely concerned about the kind of potentially disastrous consequences of introducing extremely new, powerful technology into things like warfare. So I think paying attention to both concerns and kind of having a way of communicating them would be quite valuable. So I think this is an example of a step that could be taken, explaining the concerns and motivations of the DoD and its pursuit of AI technology, both in general, but also importantly with respect to particular systems, because that's where a lot of the questions are going to be raised, why are you using this particular system, what are the benefits and costs of it. And I think also being receptive to the concerns of AI researchers and opens the possibility that it's underestimating the cost of developing new military technologies would be probably appreciated by people in industry. I think also avoiding treating the AI industry like a single entity. It's a group of companies, researchers, research institutes, academic institutes that very often differ in their views and in their concerns. and it can sometimes feel like it's just treated as one giant industry that has the same views on everything and the same concerns, and that's just like not accurate. I think also allowing, this is like kind of a final recommendation, but I have others that I've made in the document, but allowing companies to negotiate their engagement with the DoD. So in assisting in the development of systems where guarantees are made that the system will be used in the way described, and kind of mechanisms for oversight that can be put in place to do that. I think that's like another thing that potentially means that there's going to be a better relationship between industry bodies and DoD. So yeah, I think key takeaways that I wanted to emphasize are just that sometimes the principles here aren't hard, but getting them right in really specific cases is in fact hard, and just requires expertise both from people who understand like the field and the environment in which they're being deployed, but also people who really thoroughly understand the ways in which those systems can go wrong. And so giving some recommendations as to how to do that.
Good. And next we have John from Stanford Engineering, followed by Maynard Holliday from RAND Corporation.
Hi, I'm John Alsterda, a PhD student in mechanical engineering. This is just one aspect that I feel strongly about with DoD and AI. I think that bringing AI into the military gives us an unprecedented opportunity to record and document the actions of our military. Our military has been subject to a long history of disturbing allegations of unethical behavior and potential war crimes. Some of them may be true or untrue. I'm not here to debate those facts. However, among the valid concerns brought today, it is imperative that we use this new technology to hold ourselves accountable to the actions that we commit as a country. We must deploy this new technology with transparency, collecting the evidence necessary to hold our integrity, to fight false allegations, and also to take responsibility for our potential wrongdoings. Thank you.
So next we have Dr. Maynard Holliday from RAND Corporation, and on deck, Dr. Mira Lane from Microsoft.
Good afternoon. I'm not speaking for RAND Corporation. I'm speaking for myself, having been in this field for 30 plus years, having served in the Pentagon in a senior role, and being on the Defense Science Board on a summer study on autonomy. So what I'd like to tell the board is, there's a difference between ethics and a code of conduct, and you should differentiate between the two, and look at codes of conduct that are available in different technological settings, and also to Professor Lin's earlier point about trust, engage and look for external oversight to give you validation, both from the technological community as well as the public. And then I'd like to say to the people in community that says we shouldn't employ AI, when we study this, and again, as pointed out by earlier speakers, the cat is out of the bag, proverbially, and technology is diffuse and global, and our adversaries who don't have the same ethical constraints or values as us are going to be using it. So we should, at the very least, be able to defend ourselves and work at machine speed to do that. And so that may mean there's some lethality, when there's when we're defending ourselves. But again, I'd like to just say, the U.S. never wants to be in a fair fight, and that helps us all to defend the freedoms that we all hold dear. Thank you.
just want to remind you, if you would like to make a comment today, we're nearing the point where you have to make that decision. And so please do consider whether you'd like to. At the moment, Mira is our last speaker. So if you're interested, this is your chance. Over to you, Mira.
Hi, my name is Mira Lane, and I'm the Director of Ethics and Society at Microsoft. And I wanted to share 5 points. First, the technologies need not be used in the way we use them today. And they need not be used in the manner that Hollywood has envisioned them. So we must actively push against the technological determinism. There's no such thing as just introducing new technology. All things change when one thing changes. And so some examples of questions we should be asking. What is the impact to soldiers and the nature of warfare as new technology is inserted into the field? How can we obtain the data we need to create robust and reliable AI systems? As we know, AI systems are incredibly brittle and corrupt. What are some of the likely ways that this technology may proliferate beyond our intended use and into adjacent industries such as law enforcement? My second point is that the threat gets a vote. And so while in the US, we debate the moral, political, legal, and ethical issues surrounding lethal autonomous weapons, our potential enemies might not. The reality of military competition will drive us to use technology in ways that we had not intended. If our adversaries build autonomous weapons, then we'll have to react with suitable technologies to defend against the threat. So this dynamic of innovation and counter-innovation could lead to surprises in warfare that change what the military sees as ethical. My third point is that conflict entails uncertainty. It is impossible for programmers to anticipate ahead of time all of the unique circumstances surrounding an engagement with an adversary. Even the operational testing can only approximate actual conditions and the use of technology in combat. We know that soldiers will face wartime conditions where the environment, adversary innovation, chaos, confusion, violence of war all contribute to unexpected challenges. My fourth point is that transparency is essential, and decisions cannot be made away from public scrutiny. So it is important to consult with scientists, ethicists, lawyers, humanists, and put checks and balances inside the development and application of technology. This forum is a great example of what we must continue doing. States must also be able to trust that others are not secretly developing a weapon or technology that they have forsworn, because this could lead to an escalation of development. And so the question I have is, what is the worldwide role of the DoD in guiding the responsible development and application of such technologies? My last point is that with every new development of technology, new domains of ignorance are discovered, which become evident only as the technology proceeds. And the emergence of domains of ignorance is basically inevitable. And so some of the side effects could not have been known, but the existence of these domains of ignorance is predictable. So I would encourage you to find ways to create tight iteration loops and learnings and feedback systems. Thank you.
A statement about proliferation of technology into areas like law enforcement. I'm just trying to understand what you meant by that from the DoD ethics question.
Some of the concerns we have are what happens to technologies as they mature and whether they proliferate into any sort of adjacent fields. And so the question is, would any of these technologies ever go beyond what their initial intended use is? Do they go into adjacent industries that we had not thought about?
Great. We will hear from Jean-Claude Money, followed by Peter Dixon.
Thank you. My name is Jean-Claude Monet. I'm actually the former Chief Knowledge Officer for Microsoft, retired 2 years ago, and currently a digital advisor. And I really applaud this initiative here. And my remarks here is about knowledge acquisition and knowledge sharing and knowledge reuse. So I had the opportunity to create a course for Columbia University on digital transformation, and one of the topics was AI. And what I discovered is that there are many countries and organizations in the world developing similar, efforts there. And my suggestion would be that a specific portion of the resources that the DoD is investing into this journey is dedicated to formally analyze what is available already from other countries and other leading organizations in that space. So the UK, for example, has released their AI document last year. You have effort at the World Economic Forum on AI, and everybody's talking about what principle do we need to have, what accountability in AI, and so on. So I think we could leverage that knowledge that is available, publicly available worldwide, and really advance your cause much, much faster than you would do by just simple learning. And it would happen if you formally dedicated effort to do that. Because it takes time to review those documents, to review what can be reused, and having a governance process to make the decision, what is it that you're going to reuse from others, not having to reinvent the wheel. So this is really me speaking as a knowledge management expert who's been doing this for a few decades. And really, I think the point made today about weapon target and all these things are all relevant. But we can advance this faster if we are open enough to reuse the knowledge of others in that space. That's my remark. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Next we have Peter Dixon.
Hi, thanks for being here. I wanted to stand up and speak for the warfighter and the veterans. So I'm a small tech company owner now here in Silicon Valley, but I was a Marine Corps officer. I served in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I just wanted to go ahead and lay out what this actually looks like on the ground, because while it's important to think about what the future of warfare looks like and how this could go wrong, I think it's also important to keep in mind the benefits that this has to bring to the battlefield and to create a more ethical near future, as opposed to just the risk of this going sideways somehow. So if you think about the different missions that the Department of Defense and that the military takes on, it's everything from firefighting to humanitarian assistance, disaster response, right? A lot more than just lethal operations, where AI plays an enormous role. However, if you take the scariest concept for Silicon Valley or for folks that may have moral questions about this, you think about a flying robot, a flying drone, exercising a lethal strike. What that actually looks like on the ground. I've been an advisor to forces in Iraq, to local forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. So it's, for instance, Peshmerga Kurdish fighters pinned down behind a berm, taking casualties, right, screaming on the radio for help to call in an American airstrike. And you're advising these forces, but because we're afraid about taking casualties, we're behind the enemy, we're behind the front line, and they're asking for this strike. And we've had a Predator or a Reaper overhead for days, but there aren't enough eyeballs to look at all of those screens. So in addition to there being 15 ISIS fighters in a fortified position, what the drone saw, but somebody didn't see, was that there are 30 civilians also in that compound. And so that's information that the AI can see and can respond to, and we can say, listen, sorry guys, we can't support you with that airstrike, right? You need to figure out how to get out of that situation, but we can't call it in, and there are civilian casualties that will occur. So I think the pertinent question here for the application of AI in the battlefield is, if we have an ethical military, which we do, not to say it doesn't make mistakes, but by and large, we do, are there more civilian casualties that are going to result from a lack of information or from information? Thank you.
Pause for a moment, see if there's anyone that would like to be heard. Sure, please, ma'am. After you would state your name and affiliation. Sure, go right ahead.
My name is Rachel Kolesnikoff-Lindsay. I am active duty Air Force as well. And I wanted to make one follow-up comment on Peter's, that regardless of what we as a DoD decide to do with artificial intelligence, our adversaries will be pushing forward as fast and as hard as they can to utilize it in as many ways as they can. And many of their military forces, I would argue, are not as ethical as ours.
Ma'am? Please. If you would just please state your name and affiliation.
Hi there, my name is Bea Cavello. I'm a participant in a program called Assembly, which is run out of Harvard and MIT, so I didn't catch you all on the East Coast. But I wanted to comment on two particular things that are really of interest to me. One is about how to handle abuses of power. It's a question that's not unique to DoD uses of these technologies. In fact, I've personally experienced abuse by someone who worked at a tech company who had access to a lot of information about people who were users of a technology, or people whose information they had access to. I would really like you to consider how decision makers given access to these broad swaths of data about individuals or about organizations can have oversight into how that information is used, especially when those people may act outside of actually the guidances and the limitations of their role. I also wanted to talk a little bit about how there are organizations like the Campaign to Stop Killer Robots that really focus on what I kind of think of as the delivery mechanism of action or violence, the idea that there might be some sort of drone or Terminator-like robot that is ultimately delivering that action. But to me, what's of much greater concern is actually how the decision about where and against whom those actions should be taken is made in the first place. A lot of the focus of AI technologies is still pretty nascent in the robotics space, but incredibly well developed in the space of just informational awareness and surveillance. This could be really positive. It could also be really not so good. So as you all are putting together recommendations, I really challenge you and request that you think critically about what processes can be put into place around how these different directives or priorities are actually assigned, and what information is being brought into those systems, and whether the information that's being used is reliable, or whether the people who are labeling or assigning weight to that information are in a position of knowledge to be able to interpret that data accurately. Finally, I did want to also just talk about, we've heard, whether it be from service members or technologists, a little bit about where there's potential in this space, and I do think that there can be recommendations made that are less about this sort of war fighting and violent action, and more recommendations around how to avoid conflict altogether. We all know that resource scarcity is a major motivator, and that issues like climate change are really important as we look at the global stability of our future. And so I challenge you to also think about how the recommendations that you make can talk about the ways in which these technologies can be used entirely out of the space of warfighting, and instead in the space, whether it be around trying to avoid some of the pressure points that are going to cause massive migrations or other sources of instability, or thinking about how areas like investments in AI in the medical space can also prove valuable both for those in the military as well as those of us in the civilian side of things as well. Thank you.
Ma'am? Please. you would please just state your name and affiliation, sir.
Hi, I'm Michael Martin. I'm I lead a community of top data scientists at SignalFire. We're a venture capital firm in San Francisco. I wanted to follow up on the previous comment just a bit and really think about what are the, actually ask the Defense Innovation Board to really think about what are the information privacy sharing on the back end between agencies and the federal government. So what does the model that the DoD creates, where does that live? What are the controls of what other agencies get shared that with? What does the public process look like for when that happens? So for instance, if you're developing something that's to be used in Iraq or wherever, is that something that now the NSA or Homeland Security can now use without any control? I think that that's something that we don't want to be in a situation similar to what had come out about the NSA, where it was doing domestic surveillance. And I think that that's a major concern for myself, especially when this is the public process for this. But if there's not a public process around the sharing at other agencies, I think that that's something that we generally should be concerned about, and the board should be taking into consideration in the development of guidelines.
Thank you, Michael.
Hi, my name is Saurav Mishra. I'm the researcher and manager for AI Index at Stanford Human Centered AI Institute. There's a few questions that open-ended questions that I'll pose here. Number one, how could we have a valuable policy discussion and think about principles without having an evidence base? AI as being a data-driven field, there are a lot of open areas in terms of measurement and truly understanding what are the incidence reports for potential risks. So how do we have a valuable policy discussion without data? Number two, what would be an international body, or who would be implementing international rules in this field from a multilateral perspective, and who are truly thinking about these aspects? Third area is to clarify that we're inspired by humans, but in fact AI systems are not quite human at all, and they're superhuman because they're very good at specific niche tasks, not diverse like humans who learn from 3 examples and do something completely new. So from that perspective, as we increasingly learn that predictions become cheaper, the value of human judgment goes up. So the valuation of how human beings weigh costs and benefits and trade-offs is valued much higher. So that intersection of human decisions based on AI systems, what is the regulatory environment to assess failure in those regards? Another aspect is that of standards of safety and reliability. It's been traditionally done in mechanical systems for cars and tires. So again, evidence base of data and regulatory body for safety and reliability. Another aspect is that of increasing interest in national AI strategies and competitiveness of nations. There's over 165 countries where they do not have an AI strategy plan yet. So what is the US strategic role in building a multipolar AI growth pulse to have a more diversified playing field of AI globally? And national strategies are traditionally inward-looking at the moment. So funnily, the 21st century has relatively lower globalization than the previous decades. Understanding and uncovering public investment in the US in AI is almost impossible, and the information asymmetry between US government bodies itself further makes it really hard to track what is public expenditure in AI And how, if you don't have that evidence base, how do we make a insightful inference about U.S. role? Another area is that of the role of technology companies, because there is a growing notion that technology companies may have more power than governments to have access to high-performance computing, even training data, than many of the countries. So what is the role of policy in that regard? What is the role of uncertainty quantification and the fuzzy areas? We don't know what we don't know. So how do we build policies in an uncertain world, because we don't know how AI systems might respond in such areas? Lastly, in more complex areas of proxy war and asymmetric psychological warfare, the complex combination of malicious state actors and machines, how do we start thinking about who really has rights? And I will conclude on two questions I started with. What are the multilateral institutions who would be playing a role in these aspects? And where is the evidence base?
Very good. All right, well, this concludes our session. I just want to say, if there is a thought that occurs to you later, please do send it in as the instructions that we followed. I'd like to thank you for joining us. You can go to the website to see updates on this process. The next step will be a public meeting that will probably be scheduled in early July, where we'll release the first draft of some of the material. So please join me in thanking our board members and all of you as the participants in this process. If you are a member of the press and you would like to ask a question, please see Alyssa Smith in the black dress in the back corner and go find her, and we'll be linking up with you in a moment.